In lakach, Weronika, welcome to Humans of the World Stories.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to being your guest.
Yeah, in lakach is a traditional Maya greeting. What does it tell us? You spent more than 6 months, 7 months living with different indigenous groups. What does this greeting tell us?
Yes, indeed. The concept behind this saying, this philosophy, is saying basically that you are another me, that I am a mirror to yourself, and therefore I exist. I exist because we can be reflections to each other, and we can be shedding this light onto one another. So this is one of the lessons that I was basically exposed to, not through words but mostly through experience, by living day-to-day life far out off the grid in the mountains in Guatemala, with the modern Maya people. But basically, what is just the beauty of it is that having this experience of sharing all these difficulties and going outside of the system was a process of unlearning the reality around me. And it was a process also of unlearning the definitions that we are exposed to for a very young age and through our culture, which is mostly a European-centric point of view on everything that we are actually perceiving in the discourse around us. So stepping outside of that and being a little bit on the outskirts of the system is a great experience when you can transgress your own borders and see the world without your previous shell, I would say.
Well, that sounds really hard, especially for us Western civilization, I would say. People who are, as you said, we feel so much self-centric. We do believe that we conquered the world. So what actually did you have to let go when you stayed so long with local people in Guatemala, Mexico, and other parts of South and Central America?
I was basically I was writing thesis for anthropology, but later on I also turned this material into a nonfiction book. And the most difficult thing was collecting different stories. And as you are a story seeker, you as my host, you probably know what it means. But in these cultures that are not really using a written world, but are using stories that are told and are told by the fire, by the elders to the younger generation, and every story is a little bit different, and it appears that there is no one same story even about creation of the world. And this led me to think, okay, so I'm asking the people in the Mayan village, like, you have a church here and you have this depictions of your gods, what are their names and how many gods do you have? And some of the people would tell me 13, some of the people would tell me 1, some of the people would tell me 5. And I was like, you don't know how many gods you have? And that was a question from the very Western perspective, when we have to count everything, when we have to say, okay, this god is for the sun, and this god is for the moon, and this god is for this and that. And at the end of the day, for the Maya people, what really counts is not the definitions, not actually making boxes for each and every way of thinking, but the idea is to be here and now and really experience the wind, the rain, the sun, and then you are taken over by this, what is actually right now your biggest experience. So you're just focusing on it, and then you are becoming the divine self as well. This concept is very difficult to understand for our mind, and when talking about crossing the border of the rational self and going deeply into the more experience-based self, you are actually you are just like allowing yourself not to be defined, and this also is allowing yourself to be more free.
Yes, I remember when I was reading your book that was a kind of a turning point for you after, many weeks of trying to ask the right question. You were approaching people and you were trying to ask the good question, but the answers you were expecting didn't come. Do you remember that transition, that turning point for you when you realized that you have to change in order to be part of what was going on there, of that spirit, of those people?
Even though I was prepared by the course of anthropology and my studies before, we're always like, when studying, we are prepared to make the analysis and make the right questions and the quality-based questions, not the quantity-based questions, but quality questions. And well, basically, for me, the biggest humbling experience was that the idea was not even to open my mouth, but actually to stay in the silence and just be. And for us, we are brought up in the culture where we're never enough, when we want more, when we want to consume more, where we as just being, it's not enough. And in there, just being is everything. And that's the biggest difference, that sometimes just being in the silence for 1 week and just hearing a little bit drumming here and there, and just like hearing the rain together might be the biggest secret to the joint trance that can be created. But it can only be created through a certain way of focusing and certain way of being. But it's something that people cannot really even describe. And this is when the whole new realm is opening up, when you start to understand everything not through the definitions, and then how to write a book, how to talk about it, how to share the experience if it's not lived. So it's tremendously difficult, and the process of writing a book was another process for me of actually translating the culture of the non-learning my culture here into rewriting it in a different way and how to share it. That was probably the most difficult thing in the whole process.
What or how has that experience, with Malaya Indigenous Group transformed you and guided you to your next journeys, your next expeditions to visit other groups in other countries?
Well, I have to tell you that being on the road and following certain journeys, it's like going on a journey with no return. And that was exactly what happened with following the Maya wisdom, because it lasted many, many years. And I still am very humble. And I still can say that basically I'm discovering every day something new. And once you tap into this idea of the cognitive system of thinking, like how indigenous groups are and how they're constructing their world and defining, not non-defining it, then it's so much easier and later on to understand how the different societies are built, or tribes or groups in totally different diverse cultural contexts. So for me, the biggest lesson was in Laquech, that we are creating each other by just being the mirror to each other, that we exist thanks to each other. And I took this concept, I was very curious how it can work. So I went to a totally different culture. I went to Japan. I took a camera, and I was just like open to anything that can happen. And I met a man who was 63 years old, and he looked as if he's a cross-dressing person. So he was wearing dresses. He had long hair, and he looked a little bit like a hippie, but you know, but it was very hard to communicate with him because I didn't speak Japanese. That's the first thing. And another thing is that he had some disability in speaking. It was very hard to understand him, even for the Japanese people. So I based a documentary film on the kind of like a lost in translation. Like I was trying to find out the truth about him through the strangers who were actually scared of him being so different, of him being like on the margins of this society that is based with the identity based on a group, not on individualism. And that was literally like in like so you are another me, you are a mirror of me, because a camera, when you look at it, it's almost like a mirror. You can see the lens, and then you can see that usually you point it here, like through your heart. You see the world through your heart. And this is how this journey was really. The man started to change in the course of making this film. I was following him for 1 month, and he was just like exposing more and more of his inner personality, that just because I was the first person in his whole life to ask, why are you wearing female clothes? Why are you making a point? Is it an art performance, or is it like something you want to bring attention? What is that? And for the first time,
how did he find, sorry to interrupt, but that's interesting. How did he find it? Did he find it that you were just curious, or you were sincere to him? You were humble. You really wanted to know him. What was his reaction when you started asking that questions?
The best part of it is that I was asking this question through the people who didn't really want to even respond or talk because they were scared. The fear was bigger, than the ability to communicate. But I was pushing those people, which isn't a very Japanese way to be. So in a sense, they were very respectful of me being curious, but it wasn't in their really culture to confront, So, but in a sense, this whole thing, this whole experience, this journey was pushing everyone to confront their fear and to confront their judgments. And what was the luckiest thing above all in choosing him as a character to follow was that after all, it appeared that basically that was his biggest life message, to tell people, don't judge me the way I look. And I want to be around those people who don't judge me. So if you judge me because I look funny, that's your problem. And I'm going to look like that, so that I want to be just with authentic people. And for me, that was a beautiful thing, because he started exposing his normal self. He stopped cross-dressing. He started just dressing like a man at the end of the film. And he also started filming me, because he decided that that's the language. This mirror is a language where we can creating each other. And it was really putting the Mayan wisdom into action, into a totally different, surreal context. You could call it even like an art project in a sense, because it's not really documenting something, but seeing what happens if you actually take the responsibility of interfering in other person's life. I believe that whenever we take a camera, whenever we try to document somebody's life, we're no longer just observers. That is not true, that we're just observing. We are changing the reality around us, and the reality around us is changing us. So I will also wanted to make a point that this kind of observational thing is not really possible, which is a long tradition, of course, in documentary filmmaking.
It sounds like a life mission. How will you call yourself? Are you a documentalist? Are you observer of people's life. What is your mission as a filmmaker? What message do you want to bring to the world for your work?
That's a really tough question, and if I was Maya person, I would probably answer that I don't want to define myself. But I don't know. Like, it's very hard to define, as you say, as Maya people say. But I think whenever I experience something very beautiful, whenever I go to the most remote places and I experience the culture and traditions of different groups, minorities most of the time, people who are underrepresented, people who are living on the outskirts of the system or mainstream or however you would call it. I just want to be like a bridge between their world and our world that seems to be settled, seems to be very safe, seems to be organized. So I want to bring a little bit of chaos and say, are you sure that your walls of your box are so set? Do you want them to be this way? Have a look at a totally different perspective of life from people who dedicate all their hearts and lives and put everything into having a totally different way of perceiving the same reality around you. Are you that sure? So I think, it could be like being the bridge between different worlds, and I'm very grateful that I can be experiencing that on myself. And I'm always, of course, growing. I'm always seeking the growth and the lessons and the wisdom from the places I go to and people I meet. And I just want to share that's all, basically.
That's really beautiful. There is a question in my mind from the very beginning of that call. When we watch TV or internet, we see so much division, we see so much fear of different races, different colors of skin, different sexualities. And on the other hand, the world became kind of a smaller village. We can easily travel to other countries. We can see how people live. What is your point of view? What is your perspective on where the world is going? Are we becoming more open and tolerant and understanding, or are we actually polarizing as societies?
I think totally both. Like, we're living in a very interesting times where on the one hand we have a lot of freedom and we're no longer restricted by our norms and cultures and so on. We have the freedom to choose, and if we really set our heart onto something, I really believe that we can choose a life for that we want to live the way we want to live. If we are smart about it, we can construct a reality around us in a way. But at the same time, we are so restricted in other ways of political correctness and certain stuff that sometimes could be even, clashing or basically like it's just like two opposites that are right now in a constant battle, and I don't see it as something very bad. Like I think that it's like what we choose, like really how we choose to be, what conscious we choose to live, what we choose to represent by our lives, but who we are. And like, I met a year ago, I went to Mexico, and I went to a indigenous group of Kora people. That was my dream for many, many years. And they have this tradition when for 1 week in a year, all the men are painting themselves black or white. So they are basically, it's called borar, which means not really painting, but actually wiping out their identity. So they're painting themselves into black and white, and then for a couple of days without sleep, being totally tired, in trance, running around the community in a ritual way, they are fighting with the wooden swords. So I was like, so how does it work? So these are bad guys and good guys, yes? Because one are black and one are white, is it? And I was trying to ask the elders there, and they told me, no, they're just black and they're just white. Like, why would you say they're good or bad? I said, well, because, I was brought up in storytelling in my culture, then there is always this evil and good force fighting. And who's going to win? Who's going to win after this couple of days? Like, tell me. And they were like, you're totally missing the point in here. First of all, there is no good and bad, but there are two different forces that are constantly clashing. And this ritual is recreating the idea of the clash, of the importance of the clash, that there are two forces, yin and yang, kind of like, or just black and white, and the opposites, the contrasts. And they're constantly in motion, because if they would be just not in motion, they would be dead. And we don't want death, we want life. And life is the constant clash. The constant clash is with nature, with creating new life, with basically making everything in motion, alive. The same like with the philosophy of Buddhism. It's a philosophy of becoming. It's not about being enlightened and that's it. It's about becoming, always becoming, but the idea of be and come. So be is very kind of like, as it is, like stable, and coming is a constant motion. So two opposites that are one, becoming, the philosophy of becoming, of changing, constantly changing. And that was like the biggest lesson, I would say, about the idea of being different, of clashing of different concepts, of different perceptions. And it was just like the notion, the wisdom that there is no black and white, in the sense that we know from our way of thinking, that there is no bad force that's gonna be doomed forever. The whole idea is that the two exist, and it's very hard for us to understand it, to accept it. We want the world to be just beautiful. We want just love. We want all the positive things, but it's not kind of the way it would be ever, in a sense. So it's just like, I'm not saying it's not possible, because I would love to believe, and I'm trying to create a world around me that would be peaceful and full of love. But according to this tradition, the whole idea of the world, how it's created, how it is of these two forces constantly clashing. And it's present in many cultures, not even the indigenous ones, but also in the Catalan art. The idea of the when Gaudi, is saying that the conflict is the whole idea in the society. To have the conflict is having two different forces constantly clashing, because the conflict itself is when people want to agree on everything and just stay like that. This is the real problem. So so that's why I'm saying that we live in the most interesting times, and just pretending that the bad and good like are taking over, or we are like, it's just like, I think the idea is to accept it and choose your own path in it. And it's always gonna clash, and it's always gonna be there. And this is the beauty of being different, of learning, of constantly creating. It's a creativity, basically. It's a true creativity of pain, of loss, of doubt, and faith, and all of that. That is like, there is no doubt, there is no faith without doubting. That was another experience for me while making a documentary film in India. The film is about faith, basically, beyond all divisions and beyond religions. It's not about religion, but about spirituality, and giving it like that priority in your life, and shaping your life in this way to believe in the impossible. But then once you do that, you have to face the biggest ever doubt that you would ever discover.
Yes, you mentioned The Long Way movie, which I actually saw a few months ago, and it really impacted my life a lot. And one of the lessons I learned from that scene was about how connected we are in the world. That you can meet strangers and they will lead you, if you let them, if you allow them, they will lead you to answers you're looking for. You don't even have to, you just have to rely on those people and trust them. And trust is very hard, especially when we are thinking about strangers. On the other hand, is the foundation of us humans. So from that movie, what did you actually learn about the connection between people, how to build that connection so that is strong and trustful? Do you have your own recipe for building trust and connection with other people?
And that was one great sentence that you said, that you just stated. You said how to trust strangers. And the way we started this interview was about the statement the Maya people say, you are another me. You are the mirror reflection of me. So once you have that philosophy in life, then you cannot really harm anyone, because it would be like you're harming yourself. And in a sense you are, because if we are one, as many different philosophies or beliefs say, if we are really one, then harming you, I would harm myself. In this statement, you are not a stranger, you are another me. And this is how the Maya people define it, like, or state it. So for me, this is like, if we want to change the world, like, we have to focus just on ourselves. And this is the thing, if I trust myself, then I will be trusting others. If I want to build a world around me, I will go and just like be, and everything around me will kind of fall into place. So it's not about stating something, or it's not about putting walls or defining things around, but it's about knowing what you want and just following it. And that's how I kind of like put it into action, put it into another experiment through the film Long Way, and just like filming on the way basically, and seeing what's gonna happen if you follow your heart, what's gonna happen if you follow your intuition. Is it legit or not? Is it something that is just as much important as my rational way of thinking, as my mental aspects of my being. And so I think that just like being authentic, just like being yourself, and just like always getting to know yourself, always just like following something that is making you grow, and trying to be a better person every day, trying to work on yourself. I think this way we are really coming into a dialogue with the world around us, and we're in constant motion. We're not fixed. We don't want to say, okay, now I'm safe and I'm set for life. No, like it's a lie. Like, if somebody's telling you that you are always going to be happy, that's not true. So it's a constant journey of ups and downs, and accepting them, and just like allowing the way like how we want to be with others. And in the film Long Way, I chose like a totally being vulnerable, open, authentic, and just like showing what my priority is in a sense, and making it a priority. Just not saying my priority is this and this. If it really is, then just like follow it and be it, do it. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect and every day I'm like that. Of course, I'm going through changes, and everyone is like, always going for ups and downs. But I think, like, having this authenticity and courage to just try, at least to live the life we want, is the best thing we can do in this life. What else can we try to do? Chase some things that were constructed for us, that we want or should want, or should we just chase something that is inside of us?
Wow, that's a very beautiful statement, and I hope the listeners of the first episode of the Humans of the World will take it as as something we can practice every day to become a better version of ourselves, a better person for ourselves and a better person for others. Weronika, the last question. I remember you mentioned that the long way has started for you and has not finished with the movie that you released. What is the next step on your way? Discovering the world. You want to reveal some new projects with our audience? What we gonna wait for?
There are a couple of projects I'm working on right now. Yeah, but let's keep it for later. I think I prefer.
Let's keep it open. Yeah. So if people want to follow you and they want to follow your journey and your projects, where's the best place to find you?
I'm pretty up to date with Weronika on Instagram, and sometimes sharing things mostly in Polish, and Weronika on Facebook. My blog is currently under construction, so it's having a holiday. Yeah, like through those social media platforms, I would say. But I always think the best way of sharing is to be in the same space. So sometimes I'm doing public speaking, if it's possible, or the screenings of the films. And I would love to meet everyone in this way, because obviously we can share and exchange ideas through sharing a space. And obviously it's something beautiful. And I just hope that this time that we have right now will not build borders between people. We're not dehumanize our experience as humans, as this what we have inside of our hearts, and we will not have fear from one another. And I hope that we can use this time to be closer. I know we sometimes have to keep the distance, but I really hope that deeply in our hearts, going into the journey inside of us, this essence that we have inside of us can bring us closer. And I hope we can go on this discovery, and each and everyone can start from themselves. And it's a beautiful, beautiful journey, because every person is a different story, is a different, beautiful realm of amazing things and passions to discover. So I really would love to meet you on this journey, and I hope we're going to meet somewhere there.
Thank you, Weronika. And I hope that besides all the physical distance that we have to follow because of the sanitary procedures, we gonna become more and more connected as humans, socially connected and human to human connected. Maybe that's a lesson that we can learn from that times, to value our human to human connection and interaction, and just the being. And thank you so much for being with me and the listeners. It was a beautiful time. So I am very pleased. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing this series with everyone, and thank you everyone for being co-creating it by being. Thanks.